Somebody else is waiting to come in. I'm surprised that you people wanted to do this today.
We're just doing last night in repeat.
What does that mean?
Same people, more leftover food.
Oh, I
Just
see.
doing it again.
I meant doing Torah study.
Oh, well, why not?
Well, it's better than out shopping.
Yeah, I don't
Is
do
it
crowds
though?
well.
Is it? Is it?
Well, the
Fun
Citadel
stuff.
opened like at midnight last night or something crazy.
I
A
mean, why
couple
would
of
you even
places here
shop?
did.
You could do it from your phone. You could shop.
I've
Yeah,
just been watching CNN with the
Oh
hostages
yeah.
all day.
that's what I've been doing.
You know,
Yes.
isn't it weird? I mean, what is their mentality? They told us this woman was dead and then they released her. This older woman, they said like last week she had died
Well,
and
she
she's
was
one,
the one, I think, with diabetes, and she had been a cancer survivor or something.
Wow.
but they said
Maybe
she
that.
died. They said she died and then they released her and she's alive.
Oh,
Because
lovely.
what
And
I
the
heard,
American girl with the birthday today didn't get out.
No,
not yet. Did they
Maybe
do all
tomorrow.
50? They didn't do all 50 yet, right?
They didn't do
no,
any Americans. They did
no.
13 Israelis and then a bunch of Thai, who knew they took all these Thai people.
They were farm workers, the Thai people.
Yeah.
Right.
But 100, they say they have no idea where they are.
That's scary.
That the whole thing I find really bizarre right now. I'm really having a hard time with this. I guess that's why I need so much temple stuff.
They said some individual families may have come in and taken some people and they'll try to sell them.
Oh my
Oh
God.
God.
But that's speculation.
Sell them back to the Israelis, you mean?
Or to Hamas.
Or to Hamas?
Hmm.
Okay.
Well,
All
they
right.
said there are several different terrorist groups that have taken the people.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what a nightmare. What a nightmare.
It is. It's awful.
And I have heard that some of the children were given away to the locals and to Hamas, and they're not going to give them back. They are trying to inculcate them into their
Oh my
whole.
God.
This is what Israelis are saying.
Wow.
Well, that's what the Russians did. They stole so many
Right.
Ukrainian kids.
Which is
Yes.
not on the front page, you notice.
No.
Of
Unbelievable.
course not.
So I thought instead of doing, I would wanted to do something different today. Instead of doing, because I don't know, I'm not going to be teaching you again before Hanukkah. Oops. But I thought instead of doing the Torah, the Parsha, which we do, every single year, the same Parsha, blah, 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 that I wanted to talk about the book of Maccabees today, which is the original account that the Maccabees wrote about Hanukkah that most people have no idea exists. And I thought it would be really interesting because Hanukkah's coming, and also in terms of sort of what we're going through now, or Israel is going through, that it's another story. Now, the book of Maccabees is a contemporaneous account of what happened during the Hanukkah story, but it's not included in our Tanakh. And there are a number of reasons that people wonder about that. One of them being that they'd already put together a lot of the Tanakh, the Bible, and this was a newer writing, and the rabbis didn't want to include it. And it was not written in Hebrew originally, and that was kind of an excuse, though the book of Daniel was written in Aramaic as well. But probably the meaning or the interpretation that seems to resonate the most is that it was the Bible was put together during the Roman occupation. The Romans had taken over Judea. And this was an account of an uprising against the Greeks, because it was a few hundred years previously, and they didn't want to encourage any kind of uprising against the Romans because they didn't think they thought it would be dangerous. They were worried that the Romans would see it in their Bible and think of it as a call to arms, because it's a successful story of a successful uprising against an occupier, against these oppressors who try to squash all Judaism. And they didn't want Judean boys getting the wrong idea. I personally think we should have included it, and we should have the right idea of fighting back, because fighting back after the destruction of the Second Temple until really the Holocaust, we don't have very many historical accounts of that, because that was not encouraged. And then things changed. And certainly Israel, that was a whole new kind of Jew, as a warrior Jew as well. And there were warrior Judeans in this time. So I thought it would be really interesting. The other reason was it was written by the Maccabee, the Hasmonean family. Maccabee was their handle, their name, because Maccabee means hammers, because they struck like a hammer. That wasn't their literal name. It was be like the Crips or the Bloods or the Westies or whatever. It was a name of their, it was their, their name of what they were called, but their family was Hasmonean. The Hasmonean family was a priestly family. And when the Bible was being canonized, that's the word for, including all the different writings, it was done by the rabbis. And there was this rivalry and almost enmity between the priestly caste and the rabbinic caste. And the rabbis, were reinterpreting everything, and the priests were the ones running the temple. And so they didn't want to glorify a priestly caste. They were kings, the Hasmoneans, the family, for a number of years, and they were not good. They became corrupt with power as time went on. So they didn't want to give them credit, power, or extol, rebellion. So those are the reasons that scholars believe that this Maccabees, the account of the Maccabees, is not included in our Hebrew Bible. It is in the Christian Bible. And it was in the Septuagint. Does anybody know what the Septuagint is? Yes, Alex.
The Greek translation of the Tanakh.
Yes, the Greek translation, but it took place in Alexandria, I believe. But they put 70 rabbis in 70 different places and asked them to translate the Bible, the Septuagint, and that's called Sept from 70. And they all had pretty much the same translation. So they knew that that one was the one that ultimately became the use of the Christian Bible. And for some reason, well, if it's in the Christian Bible, it can't be in our Tanakh. They excluded it, but we have it. The other thing, we're going to read it. We're just going to read the first 2 chapters. First 2 chapters lead up to the rebellion. Then the next 9 chapters are about the war. I mean, they're about every battle. You want to read it, but it's very, military. And then in the end, it's about the celebration and the rededication of the temple. Nowhere in the Maccabees does it mention the miracle of the oil. It's not there anywhere. In fact, it's not mentioned. I'm sorry, I got a cold. My brother and his children and grandchildren came to LA, 5 children, all with colds, and guess who got a cold? So I'm sorry, I'm dripping here. Anyway, nowhere is the oil mentioned. The oil doesn't come in till like 600 years later in the Talmud from the time. And why did they put this story of the oil?
Oh, I know.
Yes, Cindy?
What I have heard is they didn't want for the children to celebrate war. They wanted a sweet little story for them. So it was created for the children.
Or not necessarily for the children. They didn't want to emphasize war. We're talking about everybody emphasizing war. And also, they wanted to give God the credit. They wanted to have a miracle that God, instead of people giving the credit. So they came up with this beautiful story. The theory, there are 2 explanations for why Hanukkah lasted 8 days. One is that Judah Maccabee wanted to compare himself to King Solomon, and ego much. And King Solomon, when he dedicated the first temple, the celebration was 8 days. So he wanted to, they knew that. So he wanted to replicate the dedication of this temple to be similar to what King Solomon did. Judah Maccabee lived in like 160 BCE and King Solomon like 950 BCE. So it was a long time before. And the other reason is there's some theory that it was part of a Sukkot celebration because they didn't get to celebrate Sukkot because they were at war. So it was a late Sukkot celebration, which is also marching around and celebrating and blowing shofars and having all kinds of things. Of course, they relit the menorah, which was a 6-arm menorah with one in the middle, not 8. They lit the menorah, but lighting of candles or 8 candles on Hanukkah was a tradition from the beginning, though the Talmudic thing 500 years later or 600 years later started mentioning the miracle. The custom of lighting the lights was always from the beginning of Hanukkah, because part of the rededication would be, you know, relighting the menorah, which was always there. Sorry. Our symbol of that, it's always supposed to be lit. It's the eternal light of the temple. And we have the eternal light over the ark in our synagogue. That is the symbol, the replica, or our replica of the menorah that always was lit in the temple in Jerusalem. So the Hanukkah is really, it's not so much about this miracle of oil that we all grew up with as much as the miracle of the people overcoming these incredible odds and regaining liberty for their country and rededicating a temple that was completely desecrated. To me, and they always lit lights. We could have been celebrating the rededication of the temple and the winning of the war, but the rabbis pivoted and said, no, we don't want to celebrate the winning of the war. I don't think there would be anything wrong with that, but that's how they felt in their time. There was one more thing. And I guess the customs of eating food with oil, you know, like the latkes and the jelly donuts, came with time. There was one more thing I wanted to say. I don't know. It'll come to me. But, oh, yes. What we're going to read is from the point of view of the Maccabees, of the Hasmoneans. That's the family, was the Hasmonean family. They were religious. They were what we would call today Orthodox. In that time, there's nothing new under the sun, as it says. There were a lot of secular Jews who loved Greek culture. The Greeks, under Alexander the Great, he brought in this amazing enlightenment of culture in certain ways. It was sports, athletics, the worship of the body, enlightenment, knowledge. It was, the high Greek values. And for a while, the Judeans coexist, some of them were like us, American Jews, and some were Orthodox, and their whole thing was just Jewish life. And they lived in tolerance of each other. Everybody wore the Greek clothing, the tunics. Everybody sort of lived in a Greek society because this country had been conquered by Alexander the Great, along with others, and it became Hellenized. That's how you call Greekified, Hellenized. It was only when this Antioch, he died, he divided the country. Well, his empire was so big that 3 generals split the country. The empire wasn't a country, it was the empire. Ptolemy got Egypt, like we know that. And Seleucus got Judea and Greece. He was located in Antioch. He was in Syria. He was in Syria, but he also ruled over Judea, and the Greek culture was there. But then his descendant, Antiochus Epiphanes, decided, I'm not tolerating any other religion but my religion, the Greek religion, and started to oppress the Jews. And that's when things got bad. However, you're going to hear, this is why I'm preparing you, from the point, which is so interesting. This is from the point of view of the Orthodox. So they really disapprove of the secular or, the integrated Jewish Jews who, accepted culture. So you're going to hear them putting them down and insulting them because it's from their point of view, but still they're going to tell you the story of what happened. I think to hear the firsthand story is interesting. So, any questions or comments before I show you the text? Okay. So, this is the Maccabees. Okay. Okay. So it starts, and they wrote it down. And so it's from their point of view. Don't forget. All right, Cindy, why don't you start?
After Alexander the Macedonian, Philip's son, who came from the land of Kittim, had defeated Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, he became king in his place, having first ruled in Greece. He fought many battles, captured fortresses, and put the kings of the earth to death. He advanced to the ends of the earth, gathering plunder from many nations. The earth fell silent before him, and his heart became proud and arrogant.
I just want to say that among a lot of people, Alexander the Great was extremely popular, including Judeans. And we know that during this time, a lot of Judean children, Jewish children, were named Alexander and Alexandra because they liked him. But these guys don't. Just saying. Go on.
He collected a very strong army and won dominion over provinces, nations, and rulers, and they paid him tribute.
So, one second. His empire was all the way to Britain, I think. All the way to Britain, I'm pretty sure, all the way to Persia. I mean, imagine. I mean, they were constantly, quelling rebellion or whatever, but he had this enormous empire. Go ahead. And he died at 32 or something like that.
Oh, wow. But after all this, he took to his bed, realizing that he was going to die. So he summoned his noblest officers who had been brought up with him from his youth and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. Alexander had reigned 12 years when he died. So he started at 20.
Yeah. Yeah.
So his officers took over his kingdom, each in his own territory. And after his death, they all put on diadems, and so did their sons after them for many years, multiplying evils on the earth.
Okay, so
what are diadems?
Crowns. So they put on crowns and so they had inherited, I think Alexander lived like 320 BCE or something like that. So we're talking all the way down for a couple hundred years. This is how it went. There were the different descendants of the appointees of Alexander. They each had their territory and they ruled. Okay, Alex, do you want to read? Okay, okay. That's all right. Take your time. It's okay. Sorry. I got him when he was chewing. It's funny. Okay. Verse 10.
There sprang from these a sinful offshoot, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus, once a hostage at Rome. He became king in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. And those days there appeared in Israel transgressors of the law, who seduced many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles all around us. Since we separated from them, many evils have come upon us."
Okay, so what does that mean? Who are they talking about? Okay, so who are they talking about? Who are these evildoers? Secular, modern Jews who said, okay, let's assimilate. Let's, instead of being so separate and different, let's blend in like everybody else, which is how, when we think about our own parents, grandparents, or whatever who came over here, and my grandmother wore a shadel. My great-grandmother stopped wearing a shadel, no payas, no kippah. They just wanted to be American, and they raised their kids American. And basically they're saying, let's just stop with all of this otherness and let's raise our kids Greek Jewish, but according to the Hasmoneans, they're terrible. So I love their point of view.
Can I just say Shabbat Shalom real quick? Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Okay, so where am I? Share. Where's my share? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Oh, here. Share screen. Okay. You can continue a little more. Go ahead.
Okay. The proposal was agreeable. Some from among the people promptly went to the king, and he authorized them to introduce the ordinances of the Gentiles.
The Gentiles are the Greeks, non-Jews.
Thereupon, they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom. They disguised their circumcision and abandoned the Holy Covenant. They allied themselves with the Gentiles and sold themselves to wrongdoing.
Okay, I want to stop for a minute. So, actually, the high priest at the time was an extremely assimilated high priest, and he's the one who built a gymnasium, a beautiful gym, because Greeks worship the body, and they did athletics in the nude. There was no modesty. It was completely different from Judaism in that respect. And we know this, and it's written here, that a lot of these young Jewish athletes tried to undo their circumcision because it was considered a desecration of the perfection of the body to have this mutilation on the penis. So they actually tried to undo it or cover it or whatever. And so they were living a secular, a Greek life. And they were very happy, but the Hasmoneans saw this as, terrible abandonment. Any questions or comments about this?
I have a question.
Yes.
So did these more modern Jews, did they not practice anything of Judaism?
Oh, I'm sure they did. I'm sure they were they did Shabbat, they did the holidays.
Okay.
They were kosher. I'm sure they did all of that, but they wore short kilty clothes and sandals. They cut their hair. They probably were clean shaven, because if we look at all the Greek statues and art, they're all clean shaven, very few beards. And Israel, the religious wore beards. So they were they look Greek, but they practiced Judaism, but they participated in Greek culture.
Right.
They participated in Greek,
like
us. Basically like us.
Right.
And for a while, until Antiochus, people, live like they do now. You do your thing, I do my thing. It was only when things you'll see how terrible that everybody sort of united. Like, it's interesting right now, the attack on Israel has sort of united Jews in a way. And even in Israel, weren't they at each other's throats about this judicial reform and all this stuff? And now it's like, when there's an external enemy, people unite. Okay, so let's continue. So Abby, you want to read? Okay.
So from among the people promptly went to the king, and he authorized them to introduce the ordinances of the Gentiles.
But we read that already. Go to 16.
We're on 16? Oh.
16, yeah.
When his kingdom seemed secure, Antiochus undertook to become king of the land of Egypt and to rule over both kingdoms. He invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots, elephants, and cavalry, and with a large fleet.
So I just want to stop. Why do you think it's this? Okay, just read a little more, then I'm going to ask you. Go ahead.
To make war on Ptolemy, king of Egypt. Ptolemy was frightened at his presence and fled, and many were wounded and fell dead. The fortified cities in the land of Egypt were captured, and Antiochus plundered the land of Egypt.
Okay, I want to stop for a minute. Why do you think this is mentioned in the story? What do you think the point is? Do you have any idea? How does it
No.
portray? Yeah.
No, I don't have any idea.
Okay. How does it portray Antiochus and his army?
Powerful.
Powerful. They have elephants, they have cavalry, they have horses, they have foot soldiers. They conquered Egypt. And I think they're telling you, and this is who the Jews are going to go up against. This is going to be the ones they're going to be fighting against. And look at how much this army and this ruler has already. And what do the Jews have? Not much. So I think the reason is to give us a sense of the magnitude of the enemy and the power that they're going to have to try to rebel against. So that's why I think it's mentioned there. And also, you can see again now, Syria is in the north and Egypt is in the south. We know it's like right below Gaza, next to Gaza. Syria is, past Lebanon. And Judea is a very strategic land because whoever owns it, you're on the border of your other enemy. You know what I mean? You have to go through Judea to get to Egypt, or go through from Egypt to go to Syria. So they're marching through this land. This land is a very strategic piece of land in terms of military strategy. Whoever has it has the advantage. So Antiochus attacked Egypt, and now they're returning. They're returning through Judea because they have to go through Judea unless they go in the Mediterranean and go up. They have to go through Judea to get home. And he's like got bloodlust and feeling very powerful and successful, the king and his armies. And so what does he decide to do? Okay, Abby, a little more.
The fortified cities in the land of Egypt were captured. Whoops.
No, here. Okay, 20.
Oh, I thought, did we eat it? Okay. After Antiochus had defeated Egypt in the 143rd year, he returned and went up against Israel and against Jerusalem with a strong force. He insolently entered the sanctuary and took away the golden altar and lampstand for the light with all its utensils.
Okay, so that's the menorah. He took the altar. This is all the beautiful gold things that are in the sanctuary. So now we get to see what's actually in the temple. So, okay, the other Abby, are you there, Abby Barron? Do you want to read? Are you there? Let me see. I can't see everybody for some because I have this. Who else is there? Okay, Ben, do you want to read? Hold on.
Yes, I'd be delighted to.
Okay.
So let's see, we're at is that 22? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. The offering table, the cups and bowls, the golden censers, and the curtain.
The censers which is what had the incense in it.
The cornices and the golden ornaments of the facade of the temple, he stripped it all off. And he took away the silver and gold and the precious vessels. He also took all the hidden treasures he could find.
Okay, so basically, imagine somebody coming into Wilshire Boulevard Temple and taking the Torah, taking the beautiful covering to our ark, the light, the menorahs, I mean, stripping it of all its beauty and adornment. And this is the Jerusalem temple. This is the center, the only one in the whole country. It is where people viewed God's abode. This is where God dwelled above, around this. And he came in and he basically looted the whole temple. So that was his first attack or sin. Continue.
Taking all this, he went back to his own country. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. And there was great mourning throughout all Israel.
Okay, now this is, I want to stop. This is really beautiful poetically, the grief. I think it's really beautiful. Okay, continue, Ben.
And the rulers and the elders groaned. Young women and men languished. and the beauty of the women faded. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, while the bride sitting in her chamber mourned, and the land quaked on account of its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed and with shame.
So, what was the effect of looting the temple, according
It demoralized the people? I mean, they were down, they lost their imagery, these important sacred ornaments, which was a big part of, as you said, Rabbi, the temple and the main temple, that was all gone. So they just had this kind of building that didn't have any of that temple fanciness.
That's right. And
devastation, total emotional devastation.
Emotional devastation, depression. I love how they say the beauty faded of the women, they couldn't be beautiful. The grooms were sad. There was no joy in the land. And there was a lot of joy at the temple. That was the place you went 3 times a year for celebrations, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And it was really where there was music. They played instruments, Shabbat, everything was so beautiful. And now it was like a demoralized, stripped skeleton of itself. So this is like the steps that we're seeing toward the rebellion. Eventually they're going to feel they had no choice. But really, at this point, they just feel defeated. What could they do against this huge army? They didn't feel they could do anything. Any questions or comments about this? Do you find this interesting?
I think it's like Hamas attacking Israel. It's the same thing.
It's interesting. Merle?
I felt like when the sanctuary at the main campus was in scaffolds and the murals were being touched up and everything, the window in the back of the balcony had been sent for repairs of the holes. But when I went in there, I forget what rabbi I went in there with, and I felt like they had me climb. My mother was very ill at the time, so I climbed the scaffolding to the Shema, to the thing on the ceiling, but I felt like, where is everything? Why is everything being taken away? And will it ever be what it was in my life? And that's kind of. But when I went up and climbed up there with a lot of guts to climb and touch the Shema, I felt like, okay, it's going to come back. They didn't take that one thing away from me.
Right. Well, they took everything away. So let's continue. Okay. So, okay, Merle, why don't you read? Now, so that was the first blow to what happened. Now.
So what am I, 2 years late?
Yeah.
2 years later, the king sent Mizian, commander, to the cities of Judah, and he came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He spoke to them deceitfully in peaceful terms, and they believed him. Then he attacked the city suddenly in a great onslaught and destroyed many of the people in Israel.
Okay, so this is stuff we don't really know. First, they stripped the temple. We didn't know that. I mean, you don't know that in the Hanukkah story. You don't realize it. Then one of the commanders came and said, "Oh, let's make peace," and they let him into the city. And then he attacked people and killed people. Continue.
He plundered the city and set fire to it, demolished its houses and its surrounding walls. It sounds familiar. And he took captive the women and children and seized the animals. Then they built.
So this is what he did in Jerusalem. Go ahead.
Then they built up the city of David with a high, strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel.
Okay, so this was built not by the Jews. This was built by the enemy. They made a citadel right in the middle of Jerusalem, is what they're saying. Continue.
There they installed a sinful race, transgressors of the law, who fortified themselves inside it. They stored up weapons and provisions, depositing there the plunder they had collected from Jerusalem, and they became a great snare. What's snare?
Like a trap.
Oh, okay. The citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary and a wicked adversary to Israel at all times.
So basically, just a second. How many of you have been to Jerusalem? Okay, so you know when you walk in through the Damascus gate, I think it's, oh my God, the Damascus gate. Think about that. The Greek gate, Syrian gate. There's the Citadel of David is the very first thing you see. And on your way to, which today is the wall, you have to go past that gate. You have to go past the Citadel of David, Migdal David. So in order to try to go to sacrifice, to bring anything to the sanctuary, you'd have to go back that. And this was a trap where they would catch you and take your goods and either kill you or rob you. This was the Greeks inside the city. So things were now getting worse and worse. You couldn't even go to the poor, depleted temple to make a sacrifice without some kind of harassment or attack or whatever. You can see how it's building and how terrible it was, and how ironic. We're reading about they took hostages, they took captives, they took the children, and they took the women. So, okay. Yes. Do you have a question, Donna? No. Okay. Pamela, I see you're there. Do you want to read? Or Rebecca, do you want to read?
Sorry, I am here, but I'm actually just listening in because I have to get out the door and I'm on the phone, so I can't.
Okay, so I'm going to have Rebecca read. So hold on, let me get to share screen. All right, so they shed innocent blood around the sanctuary and they defiled the sanctuary. Okay. Here, Rebecca.
Because of them, the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled away. She became the abode of strangers. She became a stranger to her own offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate as a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths to shame, her honor to contempt. As her glory had been, so great was her dishonor. Her exaltation was turned into mourning.
So this was what happened. Nobody went to the temple. People didn't go because they couldn't get there. And it became a very sad, empty place. And this is before the rebellion. So things are really terrible. The situation is getting worse and worse. Okay, religious persecution, that's just a heading that doesn't belong in there. Okay, then the king decided this was not enough. So a little more, Rebecca.
Okay, then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people and abandon their particular customs. All the Gentiles conformed to the command of the king.
Okay, now here's a shocker. Continue.
And many Israelites delighted in his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath.
So he's saying that some people accepted the Greek culture, that they said, all right, so I'll worship. All right. They accepted the Greek culture. I don't know how many, but they said, all right, we'll worship idols. And obviously, you know, we always think of Jews in the past as being religious and everybody following, and it's not true. There were obviously people who said, you know, I like Greek culture. That's fine with me. On the other hand, remember that the Maccabees or the Hasmoneans are very biased in the way they're presenting the story. And so we don't know how many, but I think it'd be interesting to hear how the ultra Haredim would write about Jews today in LA or New York. They write about us. But obviously.
Very interesting.
What?
Very interesting.
Yeah, very. So, but some people were like, all right, we're now going to be, because don't forget the whole region was following this religion. So it could have been very, appealing. Okay. So, Paige, do you want, yes?
But I think also too, it said that some Israelites were able to flee, and I guess the ones that couldn't flee, you had to assimilate, or you're probably gonna die.
Yes. Also, if Judaism had become this really sad thing and the temple was so desolate and empty, it was like, well, I'm not getting my spirituality there anymore. Maybe the Greek God is more powerful. Maybe the Greek, I mean, people were very literal a lot of times in the way they believed. So they could have said, I guess this is the more powerful God, or you're right. Or maybe it was a survival mode. We think about the Spanish Inquisition, and a lot of people converted to Catholicism for survival. So it's not clear, but there were some who agreed with the Greek religion and the Greek way of life. Okay, Paige, would you like to read?
Sure. Just bear with me if I don't know how to pronounce any biblical words.
Don't worry, everybody has that issue. Okay, so 44.
The king sent letters by messenger to Jerusalem and to the cities of Judah, ordering them to follow customs foreign to their land, to prohibit burnt offerings, sacrifices, and libations in the sanctuary, to profane the Sabbaths and feast days, to discreet the sanctuary and the sacred ministers, to build pagan altars and temples and shrines, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised and defile themselves with every kind of impurity and abomination, so that they might forget the laws and change all its ordinances. Whoever refused to act according to the command of the king was to be put to death.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So what would you do?
I wouldn't want to die.
What would you do if no circumcision, no Shabbat, no Torah, no learning, no holidays, no Jewish holidays, nothing? You have to only
build a boat and float away.
Okay. So what do you think?
I honestly feel like I guess my only choice would be to die. I just don't even feel like at that point they would even care if you were to do everything that they asked you to do at the end of the day. That was never
Just
enough.
like the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
So you do it. Oh, Ben. Okay.
I'd go underground and still practice those customs and traditions. And, I don't think I would surrender easily.
Right.
But you would pretend in person then if you're going underground. So you're practicing, but in person you're pretending like, oh, everything is great. And I don't know how you would hide the circumcision exactly.
I think I would go into hiding in some way, which I think is what Ben meant about going underground.
They did do that. They actually went and lived in caves. That's exactly what we're going to see. They did. A lot of people.
But if they went in caves, how did they ever get their food? And how did they they're in caves. How did they live?
Well, we're going to see that, you sleep in the cave, but you go out and you hunt and you forage and you whatever. Believe me, it wasn't a good situation, but I don't think most Jews are aware of how far the Judeans were pushed before they decided, okay, we have no choice. We're going to rebel against this, and how many laws and how it reminds me of the Nazis in a way, because they did it over time. First, they did the Nuremberg laws, then they do this, they slowly pushed it but these people were in their own country, and they found a way to rebel. But the Nazis, and I don't even know how they did it. It's unbelievable. It's very incredible that they did it. Okay.
May I ask one question, please?
Yes.
You're talking about my dad was hidden by the Catholic Church from the Nazis in the war time. They protected him. And my sweetheart's a Catholic boy who's circumcised. What can I say?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amazing. Okay. So has anybody not read who's here? Okay. No, if you don't have, all right. So we'll go back to Cindy if you want to read. Okay. Share. Okay. Okay. So then here we are.
In
Cindy?
words such as these, he wrote to his whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors over all the people, and he ordered the cities of Judah to offer sacrifices, each city in turn. Many of the people, those who abandoned the law, joined them and committed evil in the land.
So those are, the secular Jews who said, okay, I have no choice. Continue.
They drove Israel into hiding wherever places of refuge could be found.
Okay, so here you exactly what Ben and who else said, Cindy, Merle, that you would go and hide. You would go underground. Continue. Now look what they did now. Go on.
On the 15th day of the month Kislev, in the year 145, the king erected the desolating abomination upon the altar of burnt offerings, and in the surrounding cities of Judah they built pagan altars. They also burned incense at the door of houses and in the streets. Any scrolls of the law that they found, they tore up and burned.
That's the Torah. The Torah. Continue.
Whoever was found with a scroll of the covenant and whoever observed the law was condemned to death by royal decree.
So if you studied Torah or you had a Torah, you were killed. Go ahead.
So they used their power against Israel, against those who were caught each month in the cities. On the 25th day of each month, they sacrificed on the pagan altar that was over the altar of burnt offerings.
So over the old altar, they now had, and they sacrificed. Now look at this. This is really the Nazis or Hamas, in my opinion. Keep going.
In keeping with the decree, they put to death women who had their children circumcised. And they hung their babies from their necks, their families also, and those who had circumcised them were killed. But many in Israel were determined and resolved in their hearts not to eat anything unclean. They preferred to die rather than be defiled with food or to profane the holy covenant, and they did die. And very great wrath came upon Israel.
Okay, so now we get to, I'm just taking this. This is the heading. Okay, that's pretty amazing. The things they did, killed women and children and tortured them and whatever. Okay, so now we have, okay, Ben, here are the rebels. Do you want to read? Ben.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Okay.
That's okay.
So I'm reading number 1.
Yeah.
In those days, Mattathias, son of John and son of Simeon, the priest of the family of Jorab, left Jerusalem and settled in Modin. He had 5 sons: John, who was called Gadi. Simon,
these must have been their Greek names. Go ahead.
Simon, who was called Bassi.
Yeah.
Judah, who was called Maccabeus.
Yes.
Eleazar, who was called Abraham, and Jonathan, who was called
Apis.
Apis.
These must have been Greek names. Gadi.
So they had their Jewish names, but they had their Greek names so they could be undercover.
Oh,
right?
No, but also just like we have Hebrew and American names, they had.
But it's sort of an assimilation thing also, I mean, you don't stand out with a funny sounding Hebrew name. Okay. When he saw the sacrileges that were being committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, "Woe is me! Why was I born to see the ruin of my people, the ruin of the Holy Land, to dwell there as it was given into the hands of enemies, the sanctuary into the hands of strangers." Her temple has been...
So I'm going to stop. This is like, they're glorifying. We're going to jump because it was like, whoa, he's talking like a poetry. Yeah. And why are we still alive? We see our sanctuary laid waste, blah, blah, blah.
All this desecration. Yes.
Yes. So it's like, don't forget they're glorifying him. And then Mattathias and his sons tore their garments, put on sackcloth and mourned. Okay, continue, Ben, now. The officers.
The officers of the king in charge of enforcing the apostasy. Apostasy
is like leaving your religion.
Came to the city of Modin to make them sacrifice. Many of the Israel join them, but Mattathias and his sons drew together.
Okay, so this is sacrifice to the pagan god, to Zeus, for example.
Then the officers of the king addressed Mattathias, "You are a leader, an honorable and great man in this city, supported by sons and kindred. Come now, be the first to obey the king's command, as all the Gentiles and Judans and those who are left in Jerusalem have done." So do like everybody else. Make a good example.
Exactly.
Then you and your sons shall be numbered among the king's friends, and you and your sons shall be honored with silver and gold and many gifts.
So they're trying to bribe him. You know,
And
come
have them
on, sacrifice, then the king will like you. You'll be in good with the king and everything.
But Matthias answered in a loud voice, "Although all the Gentiles in the king's realm obey him, so that they forsake the religion of their ancestors and consent to the king's orders, yet I and my sons and my kindred will keep to the covenant of our ancestors. Heaven."
Sorry. Oh, wait. Okay. Sorry. I was trying
Where am I?
You will be right. Heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid that we should forsake the laws and the commandments. We will not obey the words of the king by departing from our religion in the slightest decree.
Okay, so no way, no way.
He's telling the king stick it.
Exactly. Okay.
I do the same thing.
Okay, Merle. Has he finished?
Okay, where am I starting?
As
he finished saying these words, a certain Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice on the altar of Modin, according to the king's order.
I mean, that's still a big city in Israel. Not big.
We have a friend that lives there.
Yeah, famous.
When Mattathias saw him, he was filled with zeal. His heart was moved and his just fury was aroused. He sprang forward and killed him upon the altar. At the same time, he also killed the messenger of the king, who was forcing them to sacrifice, and he tore down the altar. Thus he showed his zeal for the law, just as Phinehas did with Zimri, son of Salu.
This is like a biblical thing. And then he said, "Let everyone who is zealous for the law, who stands by the covenant, follow me." But literally what he said was, "Mila Adonai Eli," who is for God, come with me. Whoever's for God, Adonai, follow me. And then he and his sons fled to the mountains, leaving behind the city all their possessions. And so that's when the rebellion started. Okay. Who else wants to read? Rebecca. And here it is, exactly what Ben talked about. Go ahead, right here. At that time,
many who sought righteousness and justice went out into the wilderness to settle there, they and their children, their wives and their animals, because misfortunes pressed so hard on them. It was reported to the officers and soldiers of the king who were in the city of David in Jerusalem that those who had flouted the king's order had gone to secret refuges in the wilderness.
So they went out to these hideouts. Maybe they had food, whatever. They took their animals so they could eat or whatever, and they went. But this is really interesting. And this is where the Talmud later comes with this ruling. Many hurried out after them, having caught up with them, camped up opposite and prepared to attack them on the Sabbath. The pursuer said, "Come, enough of this. Come out and obey the king's command and you will live." And they said, "We will not come out, nor will obey the king's command to profane the Sabbath." And the enemy attacked them at once, but they did not retaliate. They neither threw stones nor blocked up their secret refuges. And they said, "Let us die in innocence. Heaven and earth are our witnesses that you destroy us unjustly." So the officers and soldiers attacked them on the Sabbath, and they died with their wives, their children, and their animals to the number of 1,000 persons.
Wow.
Okay, so Alex,
Wow.
That just happened with Hamas.
except now Mattathias changes the law. So, okay, Alex, if you can read, if you're not busy.
Um,
When
Mattathias and his friends heard of it, they mourned deeply for them. They said to one another, "If we all do as our kindred have done, and do not fight against the Gentiles for our lives and our laws, they will soon destroy us from the earth."
Mm-hmm.
So on that day, they came to this decision: let us fight against anyone who attacks us on the Sabbath, so that we may not all die as our kindred died in their secret refuges. Then they were joined by a group of Hasidians, mighty warriors of Israel, all of them devoted to the law. And all those who were fleeing from the persecutions joined them and supported them. They gathered an army and struck down sinners in their wrath and the lawless in their anger, and their survivors fled to the Gentiles for safety. Mattathias and his friends went about and tore down the pagan altars. They forcibly circumcised any uncircumcised boys whom they found in the territory of Israel. They put to flight the arrogant, and the work prospered in their hands. They saved the law from the hands of the Gentiles and of the kings, and did not let the sinner triumph.
Okay. All right. That then there's like, we don't have time, but now they talk about how they throw them out for the rest of the book, and then how they celebrated, as I told you, for 8 days. But they raised this army, and they were so fanatic, and and so dedicated, and more and more people joined them, and ultimately they prevailed. Even though Antiochus brought elephants, then they got elephants too. They got elephants, they got all kinds of things to fight back. And it lasted, it's so quick in the story, but it lasted 3 years, the fighting.
Here's question of the day.
3 years.
Alexa, quiet.
8 days a week.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that's the real story of Hanukkah, and how we were pushed to such a degree. And it's so ironic. It's like it's the same story. It's the same story today, being attacked and wanting to be wiped out and wanting us to lose our identity and our customs and whatever. And us, like then, we will prevail, is what I believe.
Shabbat shalom.
Wait, Ben, did you want to say something?
Well, first off, I wanted to say you are one tough rabbi, sick and giving us the class. So hats off to a tough rabbi.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
Thank you.
What a great
Rabbi.
choice for today.
Love y'all.
To think about the importance of being tough, and a little different spin on the story, which I had never heard. I only knew the story of the childhood story of the miracle of Hanukkah. So thank you, Rabbi, for a really
welcome.
interesting
This
session.
is a much better story, in my opinion.
Yeah.
More real.
It's the real story. It's more real, and it's the real story.
You're
So,
a great
important
storyteller,
story.
Rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom. I'm going to
Shabbat
have
shalom.
to.
Bye-bye,
Shabbat
everybody.
shalom. Feel
Bye,
better.
girl.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good week. Shabbat shalom.
That's alone.